Yes, it's Tales from the Jails with John G. Sutton. Hey, have a look at my TikTok channel, Jailer John. Just put a very amusing thing up there. I thought it was amusing anyway, about this multi-billionaire who's just got off a speeding charge at Stockport Magistrates Court. Yeah. Funny how that, innit? Driving a Bentley, 18 miles over the speed limit, gets off. How did he do that? Have a look at my TikTok channel. There's an idea there how he might have got off. Of course, I may be wrong, and I wouldn't like to libel the gentleman. He could be perfectly correct. Anyway, I'm talking today about members of Parliament and other prominent individuals who have managed to get themselves locked up into His Majesty's prisons, or Her Majesty's prisons as they were at the time. I've previously discussed my encounter with the former Cabinet Minister John Stonehouse, who was the last Postmaster General. He's the guy, the genius, an absolute genius, who introduced the two-tier stamp system, so you could get a first-class stamp or a second-class stamp. And if you got a second-class stamp, then your letter was not guaranteed to arrive within 3 days. You know, it could take a little bit longer. So what was he basically saying there? I mean, you post a letter with a stamp on, you expect it to be treated properly. What he was basically saying was, we will deliberately delay the second-class mail, which is an offence, by the way. To interfere with the King's mail or the Queen's mail, it's an offence. But that was what John Stonehouse did, and he introduced that. So, man of genius, eh? And then he got himself locked up for emptying the coffers of his own bank, stealing the client's money, faking his own death, disappearing to Australia, where he was subsequently arrested. And he ended up getting sentenced to, I think it was 8 years. And I encountered him at Wormwood Scrubs. What an arrogant, self-opinionated, entitled shithouse he was. Used to try and treat the staff as if they were his butlers, you know, as if you were his servants, yeah. Said to me one day, I've told this story before, and told it in my book, which is here, by the way, if you haven't read my work. Oh well. That's it. That's available on Amazon, yeah. He was in Hammersmith Hospital. He supposedly had a heart attack. And I was the guard at his side of his bed. And he said to me, Officer, will you get me my copy of the Times and a bottle of Lucozade? And I, in my innocence, pointed out, you know, that unfortunately they hadn't sent a butler, they'd sent me. And as I was a jailer and he was a prisoner, that was the relationship that actually pertained. So I would continue doing my job as a jailer and he continued being a prisoner. And we'd both be happy then. Yeah, arrogant pig. Imagine doing that. If I'd been stupid enough, I would have gone and got him his copy of the Times and Lucozade. But what would have happened if I had done that? If I'd gone off to the canteen, which was probably about 300 yards away or whatever, and when I came back it was an empty bed. No John Stonehouse. Whose responsibility would that have been? My responsibility. So, no, not do that. But anyway, that was just one arrogant, self-entitled bastard that I met, ex-member of the Parliament, yeah? The other guy who got himself locked up was Jeffrey Archer, yeah? Jeffrey Archer, the author, you know. I was in HarperCollins. I don't want to be dropping names, but I'm telling you straight. I was in HarperCollins. I wrote a book for HarperCollins. And I was in there with one of the directors of HarperCollins, and we were just talking about publishing the book, and he said to me, I want to show you something, John. And he took me into this room, big office, and there was about 10 people sat round at computers, typing away and all that. I said, oh, very interesting. I said, what am I looking at? He said, these people, he said, they're working on Jeffrey Archer's next novel. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, that's what they do. It seemed to me that what he'd done was either present a manuscript that wasn't suitable for publication, or he'd come up with some ideas, chapter headings and all that, and that they were sat down creating this novel. I don't know what the name of the damn thing was, but he was that's what they were doing at HarperCollins. Seriously. I mean, I tried to read one of Jeffrey Archer's books. I did. And it's very difficult to read them because you read one chapter, and listen, I know about writing and reading, I've been reading things like Edgar Allan Poe and Charles Dickens and Herman Melville and everything I've read, everything I could get my hands on I've read. But I couldn't read Jeffrey Archer because when you read one chapter and then you get on to the next chapter, it was a different feel, a different voice. It wasn't the same writer. And I knew why when I went to HarperCollins, because there was about 10 people, each writing one chapter apiece, and then they just stuck them together, I think, yeah. They labelled him as the greatest storyteller in the world, didn't they, Jeffrey Archer? Yeah, well, the greatest story was the story about him being the greatest story writer. That was the greatest story, yeah. Lots of people who are highly prominent people get themselves into prison and think that they still maintain the authority that they had when they were in civilian life. Like Stonehouse thought he could order the staff around as if they were butlers, if they were his personal assistants. Jeffrey Archer complained about the way that he was treated in prison, and I was at the time that Jeffrey Archer came out of prison working with a guy called Mark Leach. Now, Mark Leach was the editor and writer of a book called The Prison's Handbook, and I'd helped him to get a publisher in London. Indeed, I helped him to write the second volume of his work because he was behind schedule, basically. And I wrote to Jeffrey Archer and said, I'm involved with what amounts to prison reform through Eric Allison and Mark Leach and all that crowd. And I used to go around the left-wing bookshops lecturing on, why the Strangeways riot was essential to actually rid society of the kind of dungeons, but it didn't work, did it? I mean, what did happen was that there was a change in the system, that they actually started to put facilities into prison cells. But I mean, you can't make a silk purse out of a pig's ear, and things like Strangeways, seriously, pig's ears, they're going to go, There's a thing in Manchester, in the Greater Manchester area, it's called Operation Vanguard. And Operation Vanguard is they're going to rid the whole of that area around Strangeways, demolish it, and recreate, high-rise apartment blocks and shopping centres and all that. Because Manchester, if you go to Manchester now, back in the 50s when I lived in Manchester, Strangeways Tower was a big feature. It was like a predominant feature of the landscape. It isn't anymore. It's dwarfed by the massive buildings, and Manchester is turning into a miniature New York. Go and have a look, yeah? Anyway, that's what they're planning, to knock Strangeways down, demolish it, build a massive super prison on the outskirts of Manchester, and turn parts of Manchester prison into a museum. Who knows? I might be there in the museum, because I certainly was featured in the 1979-1980 BBC documentary Strangeways, made by the BBC. I'm featured in episode 3, Screws. You'll see me in the prison canteen arguing that we can't possibly allow managers to run the trade union, because if we allow the managers to run the trade union, we haven't got a trade union. I mean, it makes sense to me. It didn't seem to make sense to a number of the prison officers who said things like, this is a unique job. Actual fact, it's a job. And if you don't have representation in the job, then you're virtually subject to the wills and whims of the management. And whilst the management are there to run the system, they've got to run it in a manner that is conducive to basic human rights, in my opinion. I didn't win in the end, did I? And neither did Stonehouse, by the way. But listen, he got out early, didn't he, Stonehouse? Yeah. Told him he had a bad heart, so he couldn't be in prison. So he got out after about 18 months. He got 8 years. He got early release. Yeah. He'd be one of the boys, wouldn't he? One of the Brotherhood, shake my hand, funny handshake boys, definitely. And if you want to know what happened when I dealt with him like I did deal with him, read my book. You'd be surprised. And it wasn't to my benefit, let me tell you that. Anyway, I've had a request here. This is a request from a young lady called Catherine, who has heard me singing certain songs. Says she likes my singing, so we can't take that too seriously, folks, can we? But anyway, Catherine, this is the song that you've asked me to sing, and you sent me the lyrics, you know. I'm very delighted with that. So this is dedicated to Catherine and her dear father, and it's a rather strange version of the Elvis Presley hit, Are You Lonesome Tonight? Except it's not quite like that. But I'll give it a shot anyway. Are you lonesome tonight? Is your bra strap too tight? Are your corsets just drifting apart? Have you got a big chest making holes in your vest? Does your spare tire reach into the night? Are your stockings all laddered? Are you wearing them thin? Do you hold up your knickers with a big safety pin? Are your false teeth still worn? Do they drop when you yawn? It's no wonder you're lonesome tonight. Ooh. There you go, Catherine. I murdered that for you. Hey, Larry loved it, didn't he? I forgot the song there. Hey, that's a late warning for you all. Sorry to all those of you who've been captured. There's the late song dinger, Tales from the Jails.